Most people have a mother who is their biggest fan. Mine was my professional executioner. For years, she followed me from job to job, whispering a lie that should have ended me. She told them I was a thief. But she forgot one thing. My grandfather didn't just leave me his house. He left me the keys to a game she wasn't even aware we were playing. I remember the exact moment the heir left the room at Miller and Associates. It was a Tuesday. I was 24, sitting in a glass-walled office with a view of the city, finally feeling like Lily Rose was someone who mattered. Then I saw her, my mother, Evelyn, walking toward the reception desk with that practiced, tragic look on her face. I knew that look. It was the grieving mother mask. She didn't see me through the glass. She just leaned over to the receptionist, her voice loud enough to carry, dripping with fake concern. "I'm just so worried about my Lily," she sighed, dabbing at eyes that weren't actually wet. "She has such a bright mind, but she just can't help herself. The taking, the stealing. It's a sickness, really. I just felt I had to warn you before something went missing from your safe." The receptionist's face went pale. My heart didn't just drop, it shattered. This was the 4th time in 3 years. Each time I built a life, she burned it down. Why? Because a daughter with a career is a daughter who doesn't need to stay home and serve a woman who thrives on control. I walked out of my office before my boss could call me in to fire me. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just went straight to the one place she was terrified of. My late grandfather's study in the old Victorian house on the edge of town. Grandpa Silas had been a quiet man, a clockmaker by trade, but a strategist by blood. Everyone thought he was senile in his final years, especially when he insisted on spending hours alone with me, teaching me how to read people like gears in a watch. "Lily," he'd told me once, "people think the loudest person in the room holds the power. They're wrong. The power belongs to the person who knows the secret behind the door." I sat at his heavy mahogany desk and pulled on the bottom drawer. It was jammed. It had always been jammed, but I remembered the rhythm he taught me. Slide. Press. The false bottom clicked open. Inside wasn't money. It wasn't jewelry. It was a stack of leather-bound ledgers and a small silver USB drive with a note taped to it. The handwriting was shaky, but firm. "For when she tries to take your sky, Lily, open the blue folder." I plugged the drive into my laptop. My breath hitched. My mother thought she was the one with the thief narrative, but Grandpa Silas had spent 20 years documenting where the family inheritance actually went after my father died. Evelyn hadn't just been lying about me. She had been living a lie for 2 decades. As I scrolled through the bank statements and the forged signatures, a cold realization washed over me. I wasn't just going to get my reputation back. I was going to let her tell her little story one last time, right until the moment the trap snapped shut. But first, I needed a new job, a very specific kind of job. One where she wouldn't be able to resist making her final move. I didn't go into hiding. That's what she expected. She expected me to crawl back to her drafty spare room, defeated and begging for a plate of her charity stew. Instead, I straightened my blazer, touched up my lipstick, and applied for the one position I knew would be irresistible to a predator like Evelyn: executive assistant to the director at Sterling and Vane. Sterling and Vane wasn't just a business. It was an institution of high-end estate jewelry and private auctions. It was the kind of place where a single misplaced brooch cost more than a suburban house. When I walked into the interview, I didn't lead with my resume. I led with the Silas method. I watched the director, Marcus Vane. I noticed the way his eyes darted to the security monitors and the slight tremor in his hand when he adjusted his tie. He was paranoid. He had been burned before. "Vane," I said, my voice steady and calm, "you don't need someone who can just manage a calendar. You need someone who knows exactly how people try to cheat a system from the inside." I got the job on the spot. For the first month, I was the perfect employee. I arrived early, stayed late, and made myself indispensable. But more importantly, I made sure my mother knew exactly where I was. I accidentally left a brochure for the firm's upcoming Diamond Gala on the kitchen table during a brief forced visit to her house. I saw her eyes light up. It wasn't love, it was hunger. Oh, Lily Rose, she cooed, her fingers tracing the glossy image of a 100-carat necklace. Such a dangerous place for a girl with your history. Are you sure you can handle the temptation? I'm doing my best, Mom, I whispered, playing the role of the struggling addict she had created. The stage was set. Back at the office, I began the grandfather protocol. The USB drive Silas had left me contained more than just bank records. It contained a list of names. Names of people Evelyn had borrowed from over the years, using my name as a shield. I started making phone calls, but I didn't ask for money. I asked for testimonies. One evening, Marcus Vane called me into his office. He looked troubled. He was holding a heavy cream-colored envelope. Lily, he started, refusing to meet my eyes. I received an anonymous letter. It makes some very specific allegations about your previous employment. It says you were dismissed for unrecoverable discrepancies in the petty cash. My heart hammered against my ribs, but not from fear, from excitement. She had bitten the hook. Mr. Vane, I said, leaning forward, I told you I knew how people cheat. I didn't tell you the person who taught me was my own mother. And I certainly didn't tell you she's currently standing in your lobby, pretending to be a concerned parent who just wants to return something I allegedly took. I turned the security monitor toward him. There she was, Evelyn Rose, dressed in her finest black lace, clutching a small velvet pouch she had stolen from my own jewelry box weeks ago, a cheap imitation she intended to plant as proof of my theft. But she didn't know that Marcus Vane and I had spent the last 3 hours installing a very specific set of upgraded cameras. Cameras that recorded not just the room, but the heat signatures of anything placed inside the desks. Let her up, I told him. It's time for the performance of a lifetime. The elevator chimes felt like a countdown. Marcus looked at me, his expression a mix of doubt and intrigue. He wasn't fully convinced yet. He couldn't imagine a mother doing this. But I knew better. I had lived in the shadow of her love for 24 years. The door slid open, and Evelyn floated in. She didn't walk. She performed. She had that wobbling lip, the slight tremble in her hands, the perfect portrait of a woman crushed by her daughter's sins. Mr. Vane, she gasped, ignoring me entirely. I am so sorry. I found this in Lily's coat pocket this morning. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't let my conscience rest knowing she had brought her problem into your beautiful establishment. She placed the velvet pouch on his desk. With a shaky hand, she opened it to reveal a gold-plated bracelet. It looked expensive to the untrained eye, but in a room full of Sterling and Vane's inventory, it was a trinket. Marcus picked it up, rotating it under the desk lamp. "And you're sure this belongs to the firm, Mrs. Rose?" "Oh, it must," she cried. "Lily has no money of her own. She's always been so impulsive. I've spent my life savings covering up her little accidents at her previous jobs. I just want her to get help." I stood by the window, watching the city lights, my back to her. "How much life savings, Mom?" I asked quietly. She stiffened. She wasn't expecting me to speak. "Lily dear, don't be difficult. We're here to help you." I turned around, and for the first time in my life, I didn't look at her with fear. I looked at her with pity. Because according to Grandpa Silas's hidden ledgers, the only thing you've been spending is the inheritance Dad left for my college fund. The fund you told me didn't exist because the bank lost it. The color drained from her face, but she was a pro. She let out a sharp, mocking laugh. "Your grandfather was a confused old man, Lily. You're hallucinating. Mr. Vane, you see, this is what she does. She deflects, she blames." Marcus cleared his throat. "Actually, Mrs. Rose, we have a small problem. This bracelet, it's not ours. We don't sell gold-plated brass, but we do have something else." He tapped a key on his laptop, and the large monitor on the wall flickered to life. It wasn't the lobby, it was a video from 3 nights ago. The footage showed my mother, not me, creeping into my bedroom while I was at work, taking that very pouch from my nightstand, and then moving to her own desk to forge a letter. But the grandfather protocol went deeper. I stepped forward and placed a folder on the desk. "These are the statements from my last 3 employers, Mom. They didn't fire me because I stole. They let me go because a woman matching your description called their board members anonymously, threatening to sue them for employing a known criminal. You weren't protecting them. You were sabotaging me so I'd never leave your house." Evelyn's mask didn't just slip, it disintegrated. Her eyes turned cold, sharp as glass. "You're a thief because I say you are." Who are they going to believe? A respected widow or a girl who can't keep a job for more than 6 months? "They'll believe the paper trail," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. "The one Grandpa Silas started the day he realized you were forging his signature on his pension checks." That was the killing blow. She stumbled back, her hand reaching for the desk to steady herself. The grandfather hadn't just prepared for my career. Evelyn didn't scream. She didn't beg. She simply turned around and walked out of the office with a chilling, silent composure. It was the silence of a woman who had decided that if she couldn't own the prize, she would make sure no one else could even find the ruins. "Lily," Marcus said, his voice heavy with concern as the elevator doors hissed shut. "Are you all right? I can call the authorities. We have the footage." "Not yet," I replied, my hands finally starting to shake. "She's going for the source. She thinks if she destroys the original ledgers in the house, the digital copies won't hold up in a small-town probate court. She still thinks she can outrun a dead man's shadow." I didn't wait for Marcus to answer. I ran. By the time my car screeched into the gravel driveway of the Victorian house, the sun had dipped below the horizon, casting long, skeletal shadows across the porch. The front door was wide open. Inside, the air smelled of stale dust and something sharper, lighter fluid. "Mom," I called out, my voice echoing through the foyer. "You always were his favorite, Lily Rose." Her voice drifted down from the top of the stairs. It was airy, almost melodic, which made it 10 times more terrifying. "Silas saw something in you, something he hated in me. He thought he could skip a generation and pass his virtue to you, but virtue doesn't pay the bills, does it?" I climbed the stairs slowly. I found her in Grandpa's study. She had a mountain of papers piled in the center of the room, the old physical records of the family estate. She held a silver lighter in one hand and a bottle of gin in the other. "The digital files are already on a cloud server, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "Burning these won't change the bank's history. It won't change the forged signatures." "Maybe not," she snapped, her eyes wild in the flickering light of the flame. "It will burn the only place you ever felt safe. If I'm going down for theft, I might as well give them a real crime to talk about." She flicked the lighter. "Wait," I shouted. "There's one thing you didn't check. The blue folder on the drive. You think Grandpa was just recording your crimes? He wasn't." She paused, the flame inches from the paper. "What are you talking about?" "He knew you were stealing because he was letting you," I lied. "It was a gamble, the biggest one of my life. He knew you'd struggle after Dad died. He set up a secondary trust, one that only activates if you admit to the discrepancies and step down as the executor of the estate. He wasn't trying to put you in jail, Mom. He was trying to buy you a way out of your own bitterness." For a second, the predator vanished. The flame wavered. I saw a flash of the woman she used to be before the greed took over. She looked at the lighter, then at the papers, her mind racing through the possibilities of one last payout. But then she looked at me, and in her eyes I saw the truth. She didn't want the money as much as she wanted me to be nothing. "You're lying," she whispered. "You're just like him, always playing the hero." She dropped the lighter. The papers didn't just catch, they roared. The lighter fluid acted like a fuse, and within seconds the room was a cage of orange and red. I lunged forward to grab the heavy mahogany box on the desk, the one thing Silas told me to never let go of, as the smoke began to choke the life out of the room. The heat was a physical weight, pushing against my chest as the study transformed into an oven. Thick, oily smoke curled along the ceiling, and the roar of the fire drowned out everything else. I just hugged that mahogany box to my ribs and stumbled toward the hallway, the floorboards groaning under the sudden, violent temperature shift. I burst through the front door, collapsing onto the damp grass of the lawn. Gasping for air, I watched as the second-story windows of my childhood home glowed with a hellish light. Moments later, the silhouette of a woman appeared on the porch, coughing and soot-stained. Evelyn hadn't stayed to burn. Her survival instinct was, as always, stronger than her spite. She stood there, watching the house go up, her face a mask of absolute defeat. She didn't have the ledgers. She didn't have her daughter's reputation. She had nothing but a bottle of gin and a lighter. I sat on the grass, my lungs burning, and placed the mahogany box in front of me. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely work the latch. This box was the final piece. Silas had told me, "When the world feels like it's ending, Lily Rose, open this." Not before. The lid creaked open. Inside wasn't more evidence. It wasn't a bank statement. It was a stack of letters. Letters addressed to me, but written by my father before he died. And tucked beneath them was a legal document that turned my entire world upside down. It was a life insurance policy, a massive one, but it wasn't for me, and it wasn't for Evelyn. It was held in a blind trust, managed by Silas. I began to read the first letter, my eyes blurring with tears that finally broke through. "Lily, if you're reading this, it means Silas decided you were ready. Your mother, she isn't who she seems. She didn't lose the college fund. She never had it. I spent years trying to hide the fact that she was being blackmailed by someone from her past. I took out this policy to ensure that if I couldn't protect you, the money would be there to buy your freedom from the people she owed." She was walking toward me now, her eyes fixed on the box. "Is that it?" she rasped, her voice destroyed by the smoke. "Is that the money? Give it to me, Lily. It's mine. I paid for it with my life." "No, Mom," I said, my voice cold and clear as mountain water. "It wasn't yours. And the people you were paying? The blackmailers? Grandpa Silas didn't just manage the money. He spent 10 years tracking them down. He didn't use the money to pay them off. He used it to put them behind bars 3 years ago." She stopped dead in her tracks. "The money is untouched," I continued, standing up and clutching the letters. "But the trust has a clause. It only pays out to a surviving member of the family with a clean legal record. Every time you told an employer I was a thief, you weren't just trying to keep me home. You were trying to make me ineligible for the inheritance, so it would default to you." The fire trucks were screaming in the distance, their sirens wailing like ghosts. The game was over. She had burned the house to hide her tracks, but she had accidentally set fire to the only thing she ever truly loved, her own greed. The sirens were deafening now, blue and red lights dancing against the charred skeleton of the house. Neighbors stood at the edge of the property, their phones held up like digital torches, recording the downfall of the perfect Evelyn Rose. Evelyn didn't move. She just stared at the mahogany box as if it were a predator ready to strike. "You can't prove it," she hissed, her voice a jagged whisper. "The house is gone. The papers are ash. It's my word against yours, Lily Rose, and the world loves a grieving widow." "The world loves a story, Mom," I said, pulling my phone from my pocket. "But the law loves data." I hit play on a voice memo. It was the conversation from Marcus Vane's office. Every word of her confession, every sharp remark about how I was nothing without her, and her admission that she had forged Grandpa's signatures. I had been recording from the moment she stepped into the jewelry firm. Her face went from soot gray to a ghostly white. She reached out, stumbling, as the police cruisers pulled into the gravel. "I did it for us," she shrieked, the desperation finally breaking through. "I did it to keep you safe. The world is cruel, Lily. I was the only one who stayed." "You didn't stay to keep me safe," I said, stepping back as an officer approached. "You stayed to keep me small. You were so busy watching the door to make sure I didn't leave that you never noticed Grandpa Silas was rebuilding the walls around you." As they led her away, not in a grand explosion of drama, but in a quiet, pathetic huddle of blankets and handcuffs, I looked back at the fire. The Victorian house, with all its secrets and shadows, was collapsing in on itself. It was the end of a legacy, but for me, it was the first day of my life. A week later, I sat in Marcus Vane's office. He pushed a fresh contract across the desk. "The board heard the recording," Marcus said, his voice full of respect. "They want to offer you the position of head of internal security. They've never seen someone handle a threat with that much precision." I looked at the contract. Then I looked at the silver USB drive I still carried. "I'll take it," I said, "but on one condition. I want to set up a scholarship in my grandfather's name. For kids who are told they'll never be anything. I want to give them the tools to build their own keys." I walked out of the building and into the bright afternoon sun. For the first time in 24 years, there was no shadow following me, no whisper at my back. My mother told everyone I was a thief. And in a way, she was right. I stole back my name. And I did it using the very clockwork my grandfather had spent a lifetime perfecting. The gears had finally stopped turning, and for the first time, the silence was beautiful. Have you ever had someone try to ruin your reputation just to keep you under their thumb? If you loved this story of betrayal and ultimate justice, hit that subscribe button for more Lily Calm stories. Don't forget to tell us in the comments where and what time you're watching this video from.